Hello and welcome to Docaviv 2021 at the Cinematheque around Tel Aviv and online. My name is Shmulik Duvdevani and I'm happy to be here with the filmmakers of The Jewish Life, which is screening in our Panorama program. We would like to thank the Austrian Cultural Forum for their support in presenting this film. A Jewish Life is available online until July 10th on the Docaviv website. I'll switch to Hebrew. שלום וברוכים הבאים לדוק אביב 2021 בסינמטק ברחבי תל אביב ואונליין. אני שמוליק דובדבני ואני שמח מאוד להיות כאן עם היוצרים של חיים יהודיים שמוקרן במסגרת פנורמה. אנחנו רוצים בהזדמנות זו להודות מאוד לפורום התרבות האוסטרי על תמיכתם בהצגת סרט זה. חיים יהודיים זמין אונליין עד ה-10 ביולי באתר דוק אביב. And now I would like to welcome Florian and Christian, two of the filmmakers, or the four filmmakers, I think, of the film. And Florian and Christian, if you could just introduce yourselves, but also the other filmmakers who are not present in our conversation, just to mention their names and their time.
So who's on first? So I start. Hi, everyone. My name is Florian Weinsammer. I'm one of the four directors of Jewish Life. Two of the directors cannot be here with us today, unfortunately, Roland Schrotthofer and Christian Kermer. But I also want to say hi on behalf of them. Yeah, four directors. I know that's very unusual. And maybe we will talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we'll just add that if our listeners, our viewers have any questions, welcome to write it on the Q&A section or on the Facebook, and of course we'll relate to their questions as well. So maybe we'll start with this idea for filmmakers. How did you actually work together on this film?
Well, of course, it was an experiment in the beginning, because four directors sounds very complicated. Like too many cooks spoil the broth. But in this case, it was different because we only had this one setting with Marko Feingold, this interview setting. And we had a lot of time to prepare that setting and to think about the setting and to think also about the archive in the film. And I think it was good because every one of us found his part in the film, and it was good to always have three others to correct you, when you go on the wrong path, and especially with working with archives from that time, that's very, very delicate. And so it was good to have always someone who rethinks your ideas, and it worked pretty well. Mm-hmm. Of course, with other films, that wouldn't be impossible if you were on a set, on a live set where things are living and where you have to make fast decisions. That would be complicated. But in this case, I think it was a very, very good concept.
Mm-hmm. And if we're talking about the concept, you actually shot Marko Feingold in one set. How many hours did you shoot? Was it all at one time? How many hours did you shoot? And were there things that you actually edited out in order to keep a certain, let's say, a certain structure of the film? Christian, maybe you can relate to that.
No, well, we did it in two parts. I think about 14 days, and well, in the end, we had recorded up to 30 hours of material, and you shouldn't forget at the time when we shot the film, Feingold was already 104 years in the first part, and then we did the second part. Then he was 105, but it was he was so so incredible concentrated for hours and hours, you wouldn't believe. You have a person of 104 in front of the camera, and well, you can shoot 8 hours a day, and well, in the end, we had more than 30 hours of footage, and the next task was to watch the footage and to do a selection.
I think that was very important to have so much time with him, to have like 14, 15 days, because then you get, he's someone who told his story like every day of his life in schools, every day. He has his script in mind. And we needed that time to break these lines that he had prepared. You know, he tells his story, always the same. And of course, we wanted to break through that wall and to get deeper to this person. And that's why we needed so much time. And it was good. It was good to have that.
Now I would like to go even deeper to the film, because we are now talking, at least in the academic and theoretical circle, about the era of the witness, about the fact that witnesses are actually telling their stories in front of the camera. This is something regarding the Holocaust that certainly started with Claude Lanzmann's Shoah back in 1985. But you present, I think, an image of the survivor witness who is very much aware to the ethical significance of uh, being a witness, of giving a testimony, because it most certainly reflects not only on the past, but also on the present, and I may even add the future. How much was that part of the original thinking structure of your film?
No, I think that's the most important aspect. Well, I think we have the mission to make films against forgetting, because we all know that only that which is recorded will be remembered, and I think that the most important aspect is to compare between the past and the present. And well, we witness all the anti-Semitic and racist violent actions around the globe, and there's a new type of political leader coming up, and these political leaders are well undermining our democracy, and I think that makes also a Jewish life a very timely film.
I think, of course, it's if you just take the story of Marko Feingold, who helped 10,000 of refugees after the war to get to Italy and then to Palestine. That was an heroic act. And if you compare that to today he would be arrested probably by Frontex as a criminal. And so this is about today. It's not, and that's why we put in the defamatory letters, the threatening notes he still got to the end of his life, because it's still here. But what was also very important to us to tell the story before the Nazi, his childhood, and that whole atmosphere, that anti-Semitism was there already. It was not like 1933. It showed up. It was there, and it was everywhere. It was in the US, it was in Great Britain, it was in France, everywhere. and that this slowly grew and grew, and that's maybe something we can learn today, that we don't miss that point anymore, never again.
But I have a feeling that more than a story about his experiences in the extermination camps, and even after the end of the war, this is a direct and very harsh attack on
Yes.
Austria.
Yeah,
This is something, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Austrians, up until I think recent decades, actually considered themselves to be the
victim.
victims of the Holocaust, of the
Nazis,
war,
yeah.
and also of Nazi Germany, and also of the Holocaust. Uh, and in recent decades, I think 2 or 3 recent decades, there is another narrative, a counter narrative that actually views Austrians as perpetrators, as collaborators. And I think at one point, Marko Feingold said, Dollfuss and Schuschnigg had us 80% of the population were hungry. So, of course, they were ready to accept Hitler marching into Austria at the Auschwitz.
Yeah, that myth of being the first victim was even officially by the official government held up until 1991. 1991, the Social Democratic Chancellor was the first who admitted that Austrians took part in crimes. And that's incredible. I mean, it took more than 50 years or 50 years. And that's what Marko Feingold was always fighting against. And he was not, that's why he's interesting, I think, because he's not in this victim role, in this, he doesn't ask for pity. He was fighting. Yeah. And still, I mean, still, there's a recent, in a recent survey, they found out that almost half of Austrians still believe in that victim myth, because it's an easy excuse. I mean, it's, and it was told in schools for decades, and that's what he never swallowed, and that's where he always stood up against that, and he never kept his mouth shut, and that's why he was very uncomfortable as well for many people.
And you know, we Austrians were more than successful in well, changing history. We made Beethoven an Austrian and Hitler a German. So that's the Austrian way.
You know, this is something that actually is associated with Billy Wilder, who said about the Austrians.
Yeah, that's the best trick. That's what he said.
But I imagine that viewing your film, although it's part of a counter narrative of history, I wonder whether you were attacked yourselves about making such a film.
Attacked, maybe not attacked, but it's definitely not easy to make a film like that in Austria, because then you learn that there's a widespread opinion that people say, "Oh, not again. We've heard that, and we've heard enough about that, and that's, you know," and that's dangerous, because that's just an excuse to not deal with it. So it's not easy to touch that subject in Austria still.
For example,
we are very good in sweeping things under the carpet and yeah, let flowers grow over it.
And many nations are, unfortunately.
That's true. We are not, yeah.
Yeah.
But I, as an Austrian, I have to, you know, attack my own.
Yeah, because being the victim means you are not accountable, so it's very easy.
Yeah, yeah. And it was, of course, it was a very, very smart diplomatic trick, 1945, that they could make that deal with the US and the Soviet Union, that they are officially the first victim. Actually, that was decided 1944 in Yalta already. But I think still we have to tell the truth. Even if we get out of this, then we have to admit it. And we are still not there.
Yeah.
And that's why we need these films and these books and so on and so on. Because people like the witnesses, they will be gone in 5 years. And there's no way that they can tell their story in person, in schools and so on. So we have to keep that stories for all times.
Yes,
And the Jewish life had it easier to be realized than our previous film on Goebbels' secretary, for example. Nobody wanted to support a topic like this, giving Goebbels' secretary the possibility to tell her story. And I remember when the film premiered in Jerusalem, it was a challenge. We were quite nervous how the audience would react. There were many Holocaust victims and survivors in the audience, and well, nobody knew how they would react. And at the end of the film, it was silent. Deathly silent. And then an elderly lady stood up and said, well, I hate this lady, but I love this film. And this lady was the first lady of Israel, Nechama Rivlin. And well, the ice was broken. And well, then an unexpected success story started around the world. The film was released in 13 countries, selected for the European Film Awards, qualified for the Oscars. The accompanying book was published in 20 languages. And the film was adapted also for theater, for stage, and premiered with Maggie Smith 2 years ago. And the film was properly understood around the world, except in Austria, and that's quite typical.
But we are talking about Austria, but as I mentioned, Marko Feingold, and again, the fact that he's 104, 105 when he made the film, actually gives him a kind of being a representative of history, is the survivor of history, just like the protagonist, Goebbels' secretary in German Life. Of course, she's not a survivor of history, but she is the ultimate witness. She was there. She's still crystal clear with her mind, so she can tell. And then we don't have to use, archival footage, or we don't have to use documents and so on and so forth. But what I was referring to is the fact that your archival footage consists, for example, some of the footage that I myself did not know about, and that's why I asked you beforehand whether they're indeed very hard to find. For example, the Nazi rally in America. And when you think about the rise of fascism in America back in the 1930s, and you think, for example, the rise of fascism in America today, I think the film becomes very much relevant, and what Marko Feingold is saying becomes like, a signpost saying, beware, things like that may happen again.
Yeah, I was very, very happy when I found this footage, because it's incredible.
How did you find it, by the way?
That's from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. They have tons of materials, but it's, I think we looked through 800 hours, 800, 900 hours of footage. So, which is a very depressing process, because then you start to dream of Goebbels and Göring, and it's really depressing. But it's very delicate to work with these materials, because it's all propaganda. It's all, it doesn't matter from which side, doesn't matter if it's a US film or Soviet Union or Nazi. It's made for propaganda, and it still works. And often it is used mainly in TV reports and shows as a historic, neutral, historic, objective footage, like news. And it's not. It's not. And we decided not to rework it. We didn't edit anything. We didn't add music or color or anything. We just wanted to label it at what it is, and then show it. And the conclusion is left to the audience, of course. And it's very clear then. If you know the background of the footage, then it's very clear where it comes from and why they made it. Yeah. And we didn't want to show these well-known pictures, you know, that you know, because they already have a meaning to it.
Yeah.
And we wanted to get away from that. Especially the rally of the US American German Bund. I think it's fascinating, and it reminded me all of a sudden of the former US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright said that fascism is a meaningless aspiration for power without any ideology in the beginning. And I think that's where we are. If you compare that rally and yeah, that the last president and that whole movement, you know, it's not only there, it's all over Europe. It's scary. Look at Poland, Hungary, Austria. In France, it's right ante portas, or in Germany, AfD, very dangerous. And it's a slow process in the beginning, but then the question is, where's the point when it's too late? And that scares me, and that's why we have this personal need to make films like that. I don't know. But maybe we are looking for that point in ourselves personally. Where is it time already to, you know? I think it is. At least to stand up and participate, and not to this political agony that's also everywhere. Nobody's interested. It's frustration, maybe out of frustration, but that's dangerous. We have to take part. We have to vote. We have to take care of each other, and because if we don't, then it's very easy for these people. Back then and today, yeah.
It's always when you finish a film like A Jewish Life, we always see it as a timeless document, but it's well, sometimes frightening how timely the topic is.
But I want to relate to the title of the film, because your previous film, the interview with the Goebbels secretary, was called German Life. This film is called Jewish Life, which is apparently something that is representative, but it's not really representative.
No.
Why did you choose these titles that is very, even provocative?
Representative, it's probably not representative, but with the secretary of Goebbels, that was somehow she stands for that normal German life at that time, as a follower, as a profiteer, and as someone who didn't care. Marko Feingold stands for, you know, the other side. That's at that time, that's what happened to Jewish people in Germany, Poland, and all over Europe. And also after that, after the war, it was not over in 1945. He struggled against all the new government and the new powers, the new people in power, which were partly the same as during the Nazi era. He had a hard time to open a shop because everybody was fighting him. They didn't want a Jewish shop in Salzburg and so on. So that it didn't stop when he was released from Buchenwald. No, it went on. It went on. And so it is kind of Jewish life, because all that hate that he had to experience and all the many of his problems are created by that anti-Semitism that was still there and that is still there, and it's still, and people still can feel it. Jewish people in Austria, in Germany, and they feel it, and they have problems, jobs on the street and wherever. It's a yeah.
I think we have to thank Marko Feingold. He dedicated his life remembering this time, and for sure he had a lot of opportunities to leave Austria and to immigrate to Israel. But like Simon Wiesenthal, he took the decision to stay in Austria and to tell his story again and again. And that makes him a very, very special person.
No, he stayed because he said, that's my right to be here. I am Austrian. Mm-hmm. Because many people said, why don't you leave? I mean, it's life is so difficult for you here. Why don't you leave? Why don't you go to Israel? And he said, I'm Austrian. I have a right to be here. And why don't you go to the Vatican? Because that's so I stay here, and I would not be silent.
And then another question, since we are almost have to finish. Time is almost out, but you actually shot Marko Feingold in a studio or whatever. Why did you shoot him there and not, for example, in his house, or maybe in some of the places that he has been part of?
I think we didn't want any background to distract from his story, and that's why we are so close on his face, because we want that the audience, you cannot escape his story. If you have the big face on a big screen, there's nowhere else to look. You have to look at his face. And we didn't want to give the audience the feeling that they are watching an interview, because that's something completely different than you see two people talking. We wanted to give the impression that he talks to the audience. He tells his story directly to you, and that's why we tried to make him that big and that dominating in the picture, and then no background. And if you go at his home, then you have his home, and then you look around and you have, you know, the bookshelf. But we want to really focus on his story and don't offer any visual distraction.
I think it also strengthened the idea of the testimony. I mean, we see him, we hear him as if he's talking to us, and we cannot even turn our look.
You cannot escape. You cannot escape. If it gets uncomfortable, you cannot escape.
Mm-hmm. Now, maybe my last question. I understand the film was not shown in Austria yet. I mean, at least theatrically. But what were the reactions that you got until now from Austrian viewers?
Well, there are no, the film wasn't shown in Austria, therefore there are no reactions. We got great reactions from our fans. The fund members have seen the film and they were, well, more than enthusiastic. And I'm pretty sure that the film will also start in November in Japan, and I think the audience in Japan is also very interested in history and this topic in general. But I'm really curious how the film will work in Austria, because there's yes, the Austrian audience is different, and around the world the film is our previous film was accepted. In Austria it was a little bit difficult, and I hope for this production that it will be accepted and understood right by the Austrian audience.
I just hope that the film will go to schools, that the Ministry of Education would take that film and use it as an educational tool for the future. That I think that would be very important. And that's the place where the film has to be. Yeah.
I just mentioned that Liad Ben-Aviv says that it's a very powerful film and very powerful persona, and she adds that sometimes, but very frank and strong, especially when he portrays his life as a young man of early 20s, interested in dancing and women. And she asked, is Marko still alive? So I can answer no. He died, I think, in September 2019. At the age of 106, I think.
Yeah.
And there is another place, just to conclude, there is another place where I think this film should be screened theatrically, and that is Israel. And this is maybe the opportunity, someone is listening to us, or someone who is listening to us can tell to others who are not listening to us that maybe a local distributor can purchase the film for showing, because as Liat has mentioned, it's a very powerful and very important. And as someone who is interested not only in documentary, but all the issue of ethics and testimony and witnessing, I think this is a major text regarding all these issues. So first of all, I really would like to thank you for the film, and really from the bottom. And Flora and Christian, thank you very much for being with us, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to meet personally in Israel, maybe when the film is shown. So all the best, and thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Shmulik.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.